The origin of HIV and AIDS in the 1980s, or in more recent years after discovery, the 1920s, when it crossed species from chimpanzees to humans in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, Democratic Republic of Congo is a part of the continent of Africa. And Africa, in relation to HIV and AIDS, Africa is responsible for 70% of the world's total cases. Now, why is that? The answer is there are three reasons why: tradition, government corruption, and a lack of literacy. The first part being tradition, the controversial practice of child marriage, one where girls who are not even 18 years old, or in cases not even 15-year-old, are married off to men much older than them. Families, however, do this for three reasons: for the expenses on the family, for the safety of the daughters, and for the reputation of the family. Reduced expenses. Many families can be hit hard by poverty and economic hardship, and they feel that by giving away their daughters, they're reducing the amount of expenses the family needs to cover. The reputation of the family. Families in Africa tend to associate in tribal communities, and if a father decides not to marry off his daughter as a bride, the family can be excluded from tribal activities. And lastly, safety. Should some sort of political turmoil arise that leads to violent attacks on the village or neighborhood, fathers feel that by marrying off their daughters and having them live somewhere else, they'll be safe from any violence. But that's where they're wrong, because actually, child brides are subject to domestic abuse because they're forced to prove their fertility at a young age when they're not physically mature enough to carry children, which can lead to complications during pregnancy, miscarriages, death, and most importantly, give them a higher chance of contracting HIV and AIDS. It's also because the husbands, do not research safer ways to have sex. The second part of tradition comes from a 1990 article written by Gordon Gill titled Africa's New Direction and Experiences in AIDS and Sexual Health. Here, Gill talks about how women have two needs in life: physical and emotional satisfaction. In a biological sense, the two things that satisfy that are men and babies. This opened the door to women using their sexuality for work, and thus many women went into prostitution, and they could be as young as 15 years old, but they do it just so they could help their families make money. The second aspect of this, corruption. Corruption is very common throughout the continent of Africa. There have been many stories of infamous politicians doing this. The most common example in terms of HIV and AIDS is the approval of defective condoms. In 2007, an investigation discovered 3 people were responsible for accepting a bribe to deem condoms that were handed out for free safe to use, despite not being safe to use. They were handed out for free by salespeople, and people would have taken them, considering how some of them may have been going through economic hardships and didn't have the money to buy them. This severely discredits the public sectors in many African countries and also creates a tense relationship between people and the government. The second example of this is with ARVs, or antiretrovirals. Antiretrovirals are key to helping with HIV, but in the case of Africa, there have been 2 particular examples of corruption there. The first being the discovery that many ARV clinics were built in the areas near leaders' homes, or were built in places that already had ARV clinics and didn't need another one. This severely hurt people who lived far away that needed that treatment because they did not have access to transportation, and it was too far away as well. And even if they did gain access to transportation, doctors could give incredibly confusing directions on how to use the medication, and out of a fear of an accidental overdose, which could result in death, people would not take the medication. The last part is literacy. 1 in 3 people ages 15 or older in Africa cannot read or write, which would explain why child brides are not able to do research. They're married off before even finishing their education, and even if they did receive an education, it was not substantial enough to help them understand the issues of AIDS, understand how treatment works. This can even cause people to regard HIV and AIDS as a not so serious issue, as there are other issues such as poverty, food, and income that they feel will take a higher priority over the issue. The best way to reduce the number of cases of HIV and AIDS in Africa is that the government must be more involved and reduce corruption. There also needs to be more proper distribution of ARVs. Child marriage must end. Literacy must improve, and they need to give the people of Africa better health care. If they follow all these steps, the number of cases will steadily drop, and AIDS will not become as serious of an issue as it has been in the past.